I work with very sick people. I came out of a very big illness myself when I was young. So I found that you get more power when you focus on what you can. And so in this world now, people get prescribed antibiotics for sinus infection, which is typically fungal, and all sorts of things. And I used to take it as like, listen, don't worry about what you've done in the past or what happens. Let's just work on what we've got right now. But what I've found very recently is very different. There are many actions that affect our microbiome and that affect childhood bonding, really infant bonding to humans and to other things. Those things are incredibly important. And those I've known about for a while, but I made a new discovery very recently that's very relevant for our conversation. Usually children, until they're about 5, they will bond with oxytocin, whether they're male or female. Oxytocin is the more female bonding hormone. Vasopressin is the more male. But until they're about 5, they'll bond with that. And what's interesting about that is that in a traditional society, even in our culture, not that long ago, you would have your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents around, right? Lots and lots of love. Well, children, and I want to say too, before I say this, y'all, no one knows about this. So please don't feel shame or guilt or anything else once I tell you this, because nobody knew and no one knows now. So, or very few people do. So there was nothing we could have done. But the bonding of infants happens very differently with the males and the females in life. So a bonding, let's say I have a child and I'm obviously female, right? Whatever you're born as. So when I nurture that child produces oxytocin, which wires its nervous system and relaxes it. It's going to go into deep sleep. It's going to sleep well. It's not going to have temper tantrums. I see 0 temper tantrums in the tribes. I know y'all don't believe me, but it's true. Just go. And then with the males in the family, it could be the uncles or the dad or the grandfather, zero oxytocin is produced when they snuggle. Instead, it's when they play. So for me, if I try to play with my infant or my child, no oxytocin. It's a lovely experience. It's still good to do, but no oxytocin, no bonding, no relaxation of that nervous system. So it's very different with the males versus the females. Now, the way that we're doing it now, children don't have much of their nuclear family around at all, right? Especially the extended, the aunts, the uncles, the grandparents that tend to be that unconditional love and also consistency. Humans need consistency, to be frank. So being out of this ritual, when we study the nervous system of children in daycare, it's totally different. It's totally different. They don't have all the bonding circuitry. So that's one aspect of it that's pretty massive, I would say. But beyond that I've known about for a while. And I've talked about that. And that was my plan to talk about at the Weston A. Price conference, actually, this upcoming month. I'm really thinking about if they let me to change my topic, because I've discovered something else. For all my, let's focus on what we can change. There's something going on that's actually pretty dire. The traditional birthing practices were always done really until about the 70s. Now, antibiotics were found about 1928, if I remember right, but they weren't really commonly used until after World War II with the public. And even then, it wasn't like today. Then we went to C-section births around the 70s because those require antibiotics, right? And here's the problem. So I have been diving into, I'm a real research nerd, and I really like these microbes because they're cool. They give you a lot of power, right? Let's say you have C. diff or you're prone to UTIs or, we'll take those two. That indicates to me, I already know what good bacteria you're lacking in your microbiome because there are good and bad guys. It's like Star Wars in our body. And so for every pathogen, you have something that protects you. And as we get into this age of more and more pathogens coming out and being epidemic, that is not an issue for needing to hide in the house. That is an issue for where did our good guys go? Where are they? And So what I did, I actually sat down, this just happened last week. I've been mapping out the microbiome in terms of what epigenetic genes get turned on when you don't have certain bacteria, and what vitamins you're lacking, because it's really our bacteria that eat our food. We eat theirs. And so we need very specific bacteria to be able to assimilate certain nutrients and feel good chemicals. And they really do most of our work for us, right? That we think we do. We take the credit. We're like that bad boss, but it's really them. And so for many of these, you can't get them through food or through dirt. They're from the birthing process. And I started to see these patterns. And so I made a new chart very recently on mapping out all the birth bacteria that are given through the vaginal canal by a mother who has not had antibiotics, because I was seeing the same microbes missing in condition after condition after condition. And these were all the birth canal microbes that you do not get. And so in less than 100 years, we are on the verge of, it definitely endangered, I would say, if I may be so bold, bacteria that are our life force. They are what protect us from the elements. They are what make us feel happy. They are what help us bond, right? Look at our culture today. I just read a report that many of the cities in the States have a 1 in 22 autistic rate. Now, autism, whatever you want to say about it, oxytocin is very low, sometimes non-existent. Now, there's very set bacteria that you need for that oxytocin to be produced, in addition to other things like the way that you're raised, if you get enough snuggles and play and those kind of things. But you do have to have the bacteria and the building blocks. Those come from your diet. Now, we have that, but we also have extremely high rates of infertility. So we have a culture in less than 100 years that went to a group of folks that don't bond, therefore they don't have children, and a group of folks that can't, even though they want to. Can you imagine in a couple of generations what we're looking at? These are our birthright, right? These are things that get passed with us, for us, from the eon of man, that are now disappearing. And it's in the tribes that you still actually see this, because we didn't know. So we didn't know we were harming ourselves. For the record, folks, I'm not anti-medicine. So if you need to take antibiotics because you're dying, please do so. But please, yes. Yeah. I'm not a rigid person, but it is something that we're not aware of. And yet there are still C-sections that are scheduled for holidays. So it's a bit eye-opening. These kids are being born into a world that they are not equipped for. And now we're getting 2-3 generations in. So it's the small things, the things that we thought so inconsequential, are actually the most important so often.
In the vein of shining light on what we can control, I love that you said that. It's also really important to illuminate what is dark, or illuminate, not to bathe in the pain body of it, not to get stuck in it, but to shine light on it, because darkness cannot survive in light. I don't know who said that, probably many masters. So I wonder, and just on a personal note, my son, he was born cesarean. It was not the plan. We took him to the NICU. I don't wish that experience on anyone. I mean, Mary, I was in the belly of the beast. I was in there wearing a mask, taking off the mask. This is in the middle of the schmandemic, right?
Wow. Yes.
And it was so traumatizing, because I thought, wow, there's so many things that my son is missing out on. Now, of course, we are committed to being in play with him, nurturing, co-sleeping. He's 3. He's still nursing on the regular.
Amazing.
He plays in the dirt, right? We take him to the water. He jumps in the pool and swims. Like, he's doing all the things. Yet I wonder how you feel about this, both from a anthropomorphic perspective, but also just from a developmental perspective. Can you contrast both? If a child has been born by cesarean, seeing all the wisdom that you saw in the tribes, how they were born naturally and they live naturally, how do we course correct that ship? Because that's in the light of controlling what we can and knowing the wisdom to realize there are things we can't change. I can't change how my son came into the world, but I can change the way in which we impact his nutrition, microbiome, and physiology. These are things we can control. So I wonder how you began that conversation. I'm sure it comes up quite a bit, because all the illnesses that you talk about start from birth, and the microbiome and these bacteria. So it's so pivotal. It's so powerful. Yet we also don't need to have a conversation that shames parents and makes them wrong for doing the best that they could. So how do you begin that conversation of course correction?
Yes, because we're in a time of, it's a really hard thing to go to the hospital for any reason, because you go in knowing that it's an area that you don't know. And so you're looking towards authority, and authority itself also has a limited scope. Everyone does. No one can know it all. And so, many of the things that we used to do that I do see in traditional societies to lead to a healthy birth, we don't have.
Whoa. If you enjoyed that one you just saw, you will love this one on the screen. Click it and enjoy.